Either you want to be a comic or you've already started doing comedy. There's a few things you should know. Philip Seymour Hoffman died. I give that 2 stars. It was a little melodramatic. I thought he was better in Capote. No, I met the guy. I just feel bad because I was reading the posts and everybody's like, oh, my thoughts and prayers are with you, my thoughts and prayers are with you, whatever. And it became white noise after a while. You gotta break him out of the trance. You know, say something different, just like I'm sorry to hear about Philip. I just want you to know my thoughts and prayers are with Janine from accounting. You know how we're calling her Spuds McKenzie because she's a bitch and she has a birthmark over her eye? Makes her look like a pit bull terrier. So we fucking started that office pool to see who could fuck her doggy style, but that Jim pocketed the cat. What are you talking about? I don't know. I just thought you needed a break. I didn't know what to say. Have you jerked off yet? Can't do it that day. Even the day after, you're like, Philip wouldn't have wanted this. Stand-up comedy, if you haven't done it before, is a lot more difficult than professionals make it look. And as a result, it's also very rewarding. I've been doing it 12 years now. When I first started, I thought it would take a year or two. Stand-up comedy, let's get straight to it. If you're just starting, it takes several years to find your voice, to find who you are in comedy. The trick is to continually write, come up with new material, and try out new material. If you're not writing new material and testing it, you're not developing. It's very common, especially if you're within a group of comedians, to remain stagnant and do the jokes at work and stay in your comfort zone. That will only stagnate the whole process of developing as a comedian. Listen to Louis C.K. when he talks behind the scenes. He didn't develop as a legendary comic until he threw out his old act that he was doing for a decade or more and started writing a new hour every year. That was kind of something George Carlin established as a pattern, and Richard Pryor was coming out with new albums all the time, year after year. You always want to develop and start doing new material. This hasn't been said before, but comedy can be broken down into 2 main avenues of approach. The first one is dictatorial comedy. The other one is theatrical comedy. Dictatorial comedy is where you're talking to the audience, with the audience, or at the audience. And theatrical comedy is where you're setting up a scenario and then acting it out like as if it were a play and you're playing all the characters. Dictatorial, I said to, at, and with. You want to talk with the audience when it's smaller and more intimate. You want to make it more conversational. You don't want to overplay the room. You want to start your delivery with the energy that's in the room. If there's no energy, don't overplay it. Start low and try to increase the energy through your performance. You talk at the audience. If you're in a crowded bar, everybody's drunk and nobody's listening, you talk at them just to get their attention. You never want to do this for a long period of time. You just talk at them just to jar the audience into listening. You want to do it for the shortest amount of time possible until you can talk with them. And you talk to them when you have a full house. There's a lot of people, 40 people, 100 people, 200 people, when they're all kind of paying attention. Comedy, like Jerry Seinfeld said in an interview, I firmly believe is not a monologue, it's a dialogue, because it's not comedy if they're not reacting. So their reaction is as important as what you're saying. And you want to establish a pattern of saying something, having them respond, saying something, response, saying something, response. That is achieved simply by reminding them in the beginning that they're there as part of the show. That's why a lot of comedians, whether or not they know it, especially MCs, will say, give it up for whatever, give it up for anal sex, give it up for whatever it happens to be, and then the audience reacts. They're establishing the pattern of saying something and getting them to react. That's how the dialogue works, and my personal belief is that the whole game of comedy is to get on stage and build momentum. When you get on stage, there's a couple things that you need to achieve. First, you need to get everybody's attention. Second, you need to get their attention while remaining likable. That's basically just getting their attention without pissing anybody off. So the easiest way to do that is to command the stage in a certain way, and as soon as you get everybody's attention, you can either do that by getting up to the mic and saying nothing for a second, and everybody's like, wait, what's going on? Saying a quick one-liner that's funny, they react, and then you have their attention, and then you want to start strong, maintain, and finish strong. You always want, well, not always. All rules can be broken, but you usually want to start with your strongest or second strongest joke, get them in quickly. If you're breaking in new material, do it in the middle of your set, and then close strong. That's what you want to do. You always want to be on time. You don't need to know that shit. To be a comedian, I believe it takes three things. First of all, you need a relentless drive. A relentless drive. Statistically speaking, fact of the matter is 99.5% of all people who do comedy quit comedy. Whether they quit after the first time, in the first year, second year, after 8 years, and they haven't received any sort of endorsement or television deal, everybody quits. So the only way to be successful is to continue butting your head against the wall until you finally get through. It's one of those weird things where they give you the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. With comedy, it's kind of perplexing, but that's what it is. You keep doing it, you develop, you move forward over and over again, and at some point, it's successful. So 14 years later, people are like, wow, you're like the new guy in the scene. And you're like, actually, I was burnt out on comedy 5 years ago. I just happen to still be doing it. So the first thing you need is relentless drive. The second thing you need is intelligence. That's before a sense of humor, because if you have drive and you're intelligent, you will drive yourself to figure out what works for you. You have to figure out what works in your voice and your persona. You have to address certain things when you get on stage. If you have an accent, you need to address that, because your appearance, your persona is magnified. Everybody wants to know. If you have an accent and you don't address it, at least briefly, everybody's just sitting there wondering, why the hell do you have a Jamaican accent? Is this a gimmicky thing? If you have a scar running down your face, maybe you should say something about it. Just get everything out of the way in a humorous manner. Address what needs to be addressed. And that goes along with hecklers. If somebody heckles you, you can't just plow through the rest of your set. You need to address them. And the fact of the matter is, dealing with hecklers is actually a lot easier than you would expect. For a couple of reasons. One is you have a microphone, they don't. So they don't hear everything that person says. Two is the audience, for some reason, gives you a lot of credit. So you could say something banal or just kind of reiterate what's going on, or just call the guy an asshole in a clever way, and people will support you. The audience is generally in support of you unless they have a reason not to be. If you're doing rape jokes and somebody heckles you, it's very difficult to get them back. So you want the audience to be on your side. The weird thing about heckling is it doesn't happen that often, and it happens a lot more in the beginning of your career because the audience senses that you're not entirely comfortable on stage. When you're more seasoned and you know how to do comedy, you actually don't get heckled that frequently, and by then you know how to deal with it. Number 3 is a sense of humor. You need a sense of humor, and intelligence supersedes that. If you're smart enough, you can figure out how to develop a sense of humor. The key is writing as much as possible and studying comedy. If you want to watch contemporary comedians, you can watch whoever you like to watch is fine. I don't care if it's George Carlin, Lenny Bruce, any of the legendary comedians, Rodney Dangerfield, anybody, but you also want to make sure you're well-versed in contemporary comedians. What's going on right now? Some names you may want to watch are Mark Maron, Tom Segura, Patrice O'Neill, Eddie Izzard, Bill Burr, Louis C.K., Brian Regan, Mike DiStefano, Doug Stanhope, Dov Davidoff, Jim Gaffigan, Dane Cook. There's so many others. Steve Hofstetter. I don't know where to stop. There's a lot that I left out. The thing is, watch it, understand it, learn the structures, figure out how to write material. Ultimately, your success is in the hands of, is in the pen. The more you write, the more successful you're going to be. The more you test your stuff, the more successful you're going to be. And the trick is to build minutes. You want to build minutes because as soon as you get a solid 5 minutes, people are going to want you to do 7. When you have a solid 7, people are going to want you to do 10. And then eventually you work your way up to emceeing, featuring, headlining. And the fact is, to feature, if they ask you to do half an hour, you really need 50 minutes to an hour because every audience is different. Sometimes they'll go for some of your act, but not other parts of your act. Sometimes you need it stay clean for corporate gigs. Sometimes they want filthy stuff. Sometimes they're drunk. So when you're starting, if you haven't done it before, go to an open mic, ask the MC, tell the MC you want to do stand-up for the first time. They're usually very accommodating. Ask him how many minutes you got to do. He'll say 3 minutes or 5 minutes or 7 minutes, whatever. If it's 5 minutes, write 10 minutes of jokes and then cut out the worst 5 minutes. You want to always overwrite, over-prepare. But don't get nervous and continue to write notebooks full of jokes without ever getting on stage because you don't fully appreciate what it takes in your writing to actually elicit laughter from an audience until you've been on stage a handful of times. It's a little bit more than what you'd expect. If you write something that you think is funny, I guarantee you 20 seconds before you go on stage for your first time, it will occur to you that nothing you have to say is remotely funny and you'll get nervous. The trick to dealing with nerves in the beginning is to hyperventilate. They say deep breathing. Just over-oxygenate your body. You'll start to feel tingly. It kind of sedates you a little bit. If you like to drink, you can have a couple of beers. Don't get too drunk. I don't drink. That's just what works for some people. Another key is similar to like picturing people naked. I found that never works. The trick I use or I have used in situations where I'm nervous, maybe I had too much coffee beforehand or it's an important show. The trick I use if I'm somewhat nervous is to convince myself that I hate everybody in the crowd. And the way to convince yourself is to really believe it. Believe that all these people said behind your back, this dude sucks, he's an asshole, or he's not funny, or imagine that they slept with your girlfriend or boyfriend or whatever it is. Really believe it. And the reason this works is because when you hate the people that you're talking to, it's impossible to be nervous. Then when you're up there, stick to your act. You don't have to act as though you hate them, but having an arrogant attitude that is equated with hating people, having some level of arrogance kind of bolsters your credit as a comedian. You want to be commanding. Nobody likes nervousness, and the audience can sense nervousness. And if you're on stage and you're actually nervous, just keep going through your shit, because chances are that horrible feeling on the inside of you isn't as obvious to others. It's all on the inside. And if you're filming yourself, you'll look back and you'll say, oh, I was nervous there, but it wasn't that noticeable. Another trick is taking magnesium. Magnesium is not unlike Xanax. If you take too much, it's not good for your stomach, but it also sedates you a little bit. Also, don't drink too much caffeine. Don't take too much Adderall or Ritalin. Stay away from stimulants. They'll just make you nervous. And try to memorize your act. If you forget something, move on. Be in the moment. The beauty of stand-up comedy is that it's a one-time thing that happens in the moment. Two types of comedy, dictatorial comedy and theatrical comedy. Dictatorial comedy is when you're talking with the audience. Okay, one of my jokes in a dictatorial delivery would be, my mom called me irresponsible, but I'm a drug addict with her credit information, so who's really irresponsible? That's dictatorial delivery. You're talking to the audience. Theatrical delivery would be you setting it up and then acting it out, all the things as if it were a play. It's like my mom said, well, my mom told, Dan, you're very irresponsible. Really, Ma? Because I'm a drug addict with your credit information, so who's really irresponsible? In that theatrical scenario, I stumbled in the beginning intentionally. I said, Dan, you're very irresponsible. When I say, Dan, you're very irresponsible, it's clear that I'm acting as a different person because I put my name right at the top and I said it directly, clearly to myself. And then I said, really, Ma? So that was the response. You don't have to sound like your mother to act like your mother. You can if you want to do voices. Another trick is to, if you're doing theatrical delivery, is to write out the entire dialogue and see if you can translate the entire dialogue into one side of the conversation, as if the audience was just hearing you on one end of the phone. If you can get all the information across in one voice, it doesn't sound like you're trying too hard because you can continue with the same voice. You could just be yourself. You don't want to overact. The only time you can overact or try really hard is when you have a lot of momentum, there's tons of energy in the room, and you're just building on it. You don't want to look like you're trying too hard. You want to be confident, and you want to be casual. Another trick is people will tell you keep a piece of paper in your pocket and a pen, because if you ever have an idea for something, you just want to jot down a quick note, then you can go home and write it. On this particular piece of paper, I put, I don't know if you can see it, this is my act. That is the title of a number of bits. That's about 1 hour of comedy. 80s at the top is about 10 minutes. Then it says AIDS. That's a quick joke. Actually, I'll tell you how that joke works. The AIDS joke is I use the illusion of spontaneity. This is great because the trick to stand-up is making it sound as though you're saying it for the first time. So the joke written on a piece of paper is, I was born in 1982. I'm the same age as AIDS. I'm not nearly as popular. It's kind of a play on the word popular. Written, it goes, I was born in 1982. I'm the same age as AIDS. I'm not nearly as popular. So the way it's delivered to make it sound spontaneous is, I was born in 1980. I'm the same age as AIDS. Not nearly as popular. And that makes it sound like it just occurred to me at that moment. You could do that with your material. Go over your act while you're doing other tasks, because if you can deliver your act in your head, you don't have to do it in the mirror. I don't know why people say do it in the mirror. If I ever rehearse, I'm always doing other things. I'm walking around, I'm jogging, I'm washing dishes, I'm driving, and I'm going through everything in my head. I do a lot of rehearsal while I'm driving to shows. If I have a 2-hour drive, I'll rehearse all my new stuff. I'll go over old stuff. I'll do things out of order and try to create new transitions. Just go over it while you're doing other things. Also, when you're writing, the trick to writing, I don't know, there's a million books on writing jokes. Just read them and watch other comedians. But usually you want to go for superlatives. The most, the least, the best, the worst. The trick is building minutes. You want as much material as possible. You can never have too much material. I actually have worked with people who are like, well, I have too much material. No, you don't. That's why we're working together. You can never have too much material. You want material on every subject. You want to be an encyclopedia of stand-up. And as you develop, you also want to learn to discard old jokes that aren't up to your caliber. If you, when I filmed my first hour special, Audible Toxicology, I only used about 90 seconds from my first 6 years in comedy. The rest of it was written afterwards. I just became a better writer. Also, people talk about clean comedy versus vulgar comedy, blue comedy. Not so frequently spoken of is honesty in comedy. I, at some point, made a decision not to lie in my comedy, and I think it definitely helps. I think the audience likes the fact that you're being honest. I think they sense it, and it's kind of a challenge, but it's more rewarding that way. Here's a couple of setups or words that can lead you to punchlines. Just fill in the blank. I would rather, if I had, you have to assume, never, always, don't you think that, I would never, I would love to, you couldn't, the only thing, if there is a God, blank, which is why blank, blank, or you can blank. I didn't think it was possible to blank, which is why, I think I said that, the only reason, the only time I never thought, why would I, why would you, there's no way, you can't, what does it take, isn't that why, I've never, so what, I can, you know what's better than blank, I don't like blank, isn't that why, can anyone explain, there's no excuse, usually I, never again, first of all, generally speaking, ordinarily, there has never been, in other words, all those can be filled in to make a joke. The trick is to write as much as possible. It's just an example of the amount of work that goes into comedy. First, the amount of pens I burned through, then 10,000 pages of notes relative to Homer's The Odyssey, stacks and stacks. This is just showing you that I write on the front and the back, overwrite, cross out, rehearse, remember, forget. 4 out of 10 you bring to the stage. 1 out of those 4 works. It's about a 10% success rate. So it's a lot of work for a little payoff. And then you end up with, or at least I did, 3 hours of material, which are about to come up. My first hour, Audible Toxicology, is available on YouTube. My second hour, with the wrong names on the cover. And then my third hour, which is going to be about religion. If you want to watch my first hour special, it's called Audible Toxicology. You can find it on YouTube on this channel. These are the notes for the entire special. This is the whole special in notes. This is I guess an hour and 9 or 10 minutes in notes. It's about an hour and 9 minutes in notes. Don't quit. Work harder than everybody else. It's rewarding. It's great when you develop and you get good. It's really great when you have a sense of competence on stage and you can really be in the moment. You're not nervous anymore. You can draw more energy out of the crowd. You can decide how much time you let them react to your material. You can talk over them if you want while they're reacting, kind of in a commanding sense. When you can play with it, it becomes more of an artistic expression. But the trick to getting there is to get on stage as much as possible. And by that I mean always try to take longer sets, but prepare for them. Never take a longer set that you're not prepared for. What moved me ahead was was a number of things. In New York City, a friend of mine who is a comedian, Dave Celestian and myself would get street permits and do street comedy through a megaphone for 6 or 8 hours. We had to fill 8 hours of comedy, and it was brutal. And after a while, we actually got people to stop and listen, and we get tips, and you get a lot better. When you start doing comedy, you'll realize that people will give you 5 minutes at an open mic, and the truth is you really want to seek out longer sets. Develop, get more material. If you can do half-hour sets, do half hours. If you can do hours, do hours. But that's down the road, because longer sets allow you to establish yourself, maintain, close strong. You develop a lot more as a comedian. And I would rather do a half-hour set than 3 10-minute sets. It's the same amount of time, but there's less time commuting to the venue, waiting to get on stage, going back. And it's also more challenging to maintain for half an hour. If you're just starting out, there's a couple ways to get stage time. I recommend going to open mics, finding good open mics too, where people listen, they're responsive, challenging open mics. There's in cities, there's something called barking. That's where you solicit pedestrians walking by in the city to see the comedy show. It's very common in Manhattan. I did my first 7 years in New York City. I barked for a long time, handing out flyers, selling tickets to get stage time. There's also something called bringer shows. I don't recommend this. I think it's really the bane of the industry. It's where they get people who don't know much about comedy to bring their friends and family out to see them do comedy. And no matter what you think, your first year of comedy, you're not good. You're just not good. And even if you are good, you're not nearly as good as you will be in your 3rd, 5th, 8th year. So I never recommend doing bringer shows because, for one, why would your friends and family want to pay to listen to you? It seems like exploitation. For two, you're not as good as you think you are. And I'll tell you, as a matter of fact, nobody ever asks features and headliners to do bringer shows. I don't know. If you want to do them, do them. Sometimes it works out. I don't recommend it. I recommend finding as many open mics as possible, networking, making friends, and if you're in a big city, barking for stage time, and make the most of your stage time. Never go there unprepared. Always make sure you're ready and prepared for what you're going to do. In closing, stand-up is like anything else. Work hard, sacrifice. If you're intelligent and you continue to work as hard as possible, don't give up. And if you work for a longer period of time than other people, you will at some point find success. It's very difficult to be skilled at the craft and undiscovered, but everybody goes through that period at some point. The alternative is worse. You get discovered before you're ready and you wash up. So just work hard, write a lot. Stay tuned. I'm going to have more stand-up on my channel. I have a new special coming out this year, 2017, called Serial Anonymity. And I also have a book coming out in April of 2017 called Sobering Stand-Up. It's going to be an in-depth analysis of stand-up comedy as an artistic pursuit. It's going to be somewhat self-analysis, but it's going to be very prescriptive as to how to approach stand-up comedy, my philosophy, what I've found to work. It's going to be a lot like this video, just in depth, and it covers a lot of stuff that the idea was to cover as much stuff I found to be neglected or absent in the other works on stand-up comedy. I read all the books on stand-up comedy. They're very good. For the most part, I wanted to address things that I've learned in my 12 years of stand-up that weren't addressed in these other books. So thanks for watching this video. Subscribe if you like, leave comments. If you have any questions, I will respond to them in the comments below. There's more stand-up comedy to come. Alright, thanks for watching.